Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, we need to begin this week's weather forecasting by looking at this satellite animation, which begins on Sunday midday and runs through early in the morning on Monday. And what it is featuring is the end result of that typhoon I talked about, Super Typhoon Hagibis. Now, this was a long time ago, but we discussed how it was going to be perturbing the jet stream, strengthening the jet stream, and you can see the nose of it screaming into the northwest on Sunday. It then built into this deep low pressure system that is moving through the central part of the United States. And as we watch Nestor move on off of the northeast coast here of the United States, the next system is lined up behind it, and in the overnight hours brought in a lot of severe weather here into parts of the south central United States. So Carolinas, this is what is on tap and in store and coming toward us here at the beginning and middle of this week. Now we can see that it did have a history of producing some strong winds in parts of Idaho, and then the overnight hours last night into early Monday morning, a lot of severe weather down here in parts of the south central United States, including this terrifying view of this tornado near Rockwall, Texas. So that is just north of Dallas. And Athena Rising, who sent this video out on the web and allowed us all to show it here, incredible to see this nocturnal tornado here. These are the most destructive and devastating because, of course, it's at night and we cannot see them unless we have power flashes like this or lightning flashes. And this particular tornado causing a lot of damage. We're just now early this morning seeing some of the results from it. So I'm showing you this, you in the Carolinas, I'm showing you this so that we understand the strength and vigor of the system that is moving through. Early this morning, look at all the lightning associated with the leading edge of the frontal squall line that is coming toward the Carolinas. And now there is no big ridge sitting over the southeast to protect us from a system like this coming through. So we're going to get some rain out of this. Now, speaking of rain, this is the total amount we've seen just in the last 24 hours or so that's come through with that system. But this map shows you the last 72 hours. So we can see the influence of Nestor over here on the East Coast. And we talked in last week's video about the potential for this. And then throughout all of last week, toward the end of the week, we then saw this tropical system making its way toward the Florida-Georgia coast here, towards the Florida Panhandle and then into Georgia before bringing in very meaningful rainfall to the Carolinas. We saw widespread 1 to upwards of 3 inches of rainfall as Nestor moved on through. And putting this in perspective, look at the last 7 days in terms of percent of normal. We really brought up our precip in that area, of course, seeing 200 to 300% of average. And what I'm glad to see here is that this has worked on a region that over the last month has seen a lot of drought reestablish itself here and stay permanent in some locations across the Carolinas and parts of the southeast, and also getting up in the mid-Atlantic here. So when we get the new drought monitor update, which will come out at the end of this week on Thursday, I imagine we will see some improvement in this area that I just circled here because of the rainfall that just came through with Tropical Storm Nestor. Now, we saw up to this point that over the month leading up to that most recent drought monitor report, we did see between a 2 and 3 class degradation of drought all in the southeast and primarily a 1 to 2 class degradation in parts of the Carolinas. But the only region that isn't showing up in our longer-term drought is right here along the coast where Dorian came through, but still recently we've been very dry in that area as well. Okay, just to put this all finally in perspective here, this is what we were looking at before we got into the beginning of this week with our calculated soil moisture anomalies. So we can see that in parts of the Carolinas, we are as much as 3 to 4 inches in deficit in total rainfall here, getting into our soil and keeping things moist. Now, Nestor was a blessing, but at the same time, it did come through at a time when we were trying to get some harvesting done. But I think a lot of this rain that came through did soak in pretty quickly. But we do have more that is coming. I'm going to show you when and how much. This is on Monday. We can see the main severe that is still west of the Carolinas here. But we will be watching in the overnight hours on Monday for those storms to be progressing toward the Carolina coast. Well, really first toward the Appalachian Mountains and then toward the Carolina coast into the day on Tuesday. So we're going to keep a close eye on what's coming and when. So here's our system pushing through the midsection of the country. This is stopped here at 6 p.m. Central Time on Monday. So at that time, we have a well-developed extratropical cyclone or low-pressure center that's moving through the north-central part of the U.S. Now, if you're a corn or soybean farmer in the Carolinas, this is significant because remember, last week we put down a lot of snowfall right here in parts of the Dakotas and western Minnesota. We're now adding more rain, some very strong winds, and on the backside of this, potentially a little bit more snow. But as you can see, by 10 p.m. Monday, getting into the overnight hours Monday to Tuesday morning, the main frontal band out ahead of this big low pressure system will be finally pushing through the Appalachian Mountains, such that by early Tuesday morning, we're now seeing those storms in the Carolinas. And some of these storms do have the potential to be severe, so watch throughout the day. On Tuesday, you could have multiple rounds. The leading edge, the upper level boundary is moving through early in the morning, so you can see here the storms that have moved now to the east of Raleigh here, stretching kind of in this corridor, but you will see later on in the day, look at this, this is 3, 4, 5, another chance at some heavy rain from some locally heavy storms. Now, after that moves through, you can see that high pressure starts to take hold here over a big section of the southeast. And we need to talk about where we're going from there. So let's play out a longer range model. This is the GFS, and we're just going to stop this Tuesday evening. So we've seen the storms come through. Now, after that, look at the high pressure that tends to stay in control. We get all the way out to Thursday evening and into Friday. And this is where things really start to break down. Now, watch what the GFS does. Starting off on Friday morning, getting into Friday midday, Friday afternoon and evening, getting into the early morning on Saturday. The GFS model for the end of our week is wanting to bring in a lot of precipitation. And it is important for you to understand that this is not set in stone. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Through Thursday evening, our models have fairly good agreement here on what kind of precipitation we are expecting. You can see that with the storm system that's coming through, there will be a band of some heavier rainfall, slight differences between the GFS, which is on the left, and the European model, which is on the right. But still, we see that frontal band of showers and thunderstorms coming through toward the end of the week. Maybe some locally heavy rain, picking up around 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Okay, we're going to have to just watch it on radar as it comes through. But look at these differences from Thursday through Friday and Saturday. Now, on Thursday, things look relatively similar. Remember, we have that bigger ridge, the high pressure center that's sitting here. It's in both models. But there's subtle differences upstream of that, which means getting back to the west. And those manifest themselves here. Now, as you get into the day on Friday, the GFS has high pressure and control there, whereas the European model brings it over like this. Now, you're going to see in a few moments what the significance is and the difference between that configuration, but this is now Saturday. By Saturday, getting into the evening hours, we see that the GFS has a deeper low sitting right here on kind of the U.S.-Canada border, and the European has a little bit farther to the north. And look at the orientation here of the surface high pressure system from the GFS versus the European. And then look at what we see by the time we get into Sunday afternoon and evening. The GFS has a ridge in this location. The European has it here. Now, why bring up these differences? What do they all translate into? They translate into this. This is Thursday evening's rainfall totals through Sunday evening, that time period. And the GFS wants to bring a whole lot more rainfall through parts of Mississippi, Georgia, and then into the Carolinas, such that we're talking about anywhere between 1 inch and 3 inches of rain. Because of the differences in the models, the European wants to keep more protective high pressure over parts of the Carolinas, keep a lot more of that rainfall here into the lower Mississippi River Valley, stretching up into parts of the Mid-South. Two entirely different solutions. And to be honest with you, at this stage, I can see why both models are doing what they're doing. So the end result of this is that because these differences are so subtle, we're just going to have to watch what evolves after the first system passes through to get a better idea on what the end of the week is going to look like and the weekend. So keep a close eye on it. It's called nowcasting, where you're forecasting the immediate moment to see how things are changing in real time. It's going to be a tricky end of the week forecast for the Carolinas. And at this point in the week, this is the best information I have through early in the morning on Monday, okay? Now, for week 2, we do see a little bit better agreement in our models. I have the GFS ensemble on the left and the European ensemble on the right for week 2 precipitation. We can see that in both models, they want the northwest dry. I'll tell you why in a few seconds, because that's critical for seeing this corridor here having better chances of more rainfall coming through. So let's now talk about what's controlling week 2. First, I'm going to give you an update on the tropical Atlantic. Nothing is going on over the next 5 days. Where all the action is in the tropical Pacific, where we're watching a new typhoon I think it's called Boaloi, that's right here moving just to the east of Japan that gets pulled into the jet stream flow. Very similar to Hagibis 15 days ago. And these typhoons tend to recurve and then kind of disrupt the jet stream flow. At the same time that is happening, we have seen across parts of the Indian Ocean and the West Pacific an expansion of our easterly winds. That's taken our Southern Oscillation Index back up toward positive territory. And what all of that means is, take a look at what our ocean temperatures are doing. We still have our very strong Indian Ocean dipole event sending wind that way, but we can see now that over here in the El Nino region, our ocean temperatures are moderating some bit. They had been cold, they're now going back over toward INSO neutral. What I want you all to watch me discuss over the coming weeks is what's going to happen in between the two. If we continue to see water temperatures here stay warm, it could produce a strong subtropical jet stream that could produce a very active November, December, and January for the Carolinas in terms of our weather systems, because much of the North Pacific right now is quite warm. So we need to see these events all shaping up together with what we call a Mordecai El Nino, which is where we tend to get some cooler water over here and warmer water over here, and what that may mean for our upcoming winter forecast. But coming back to the near term, I expect the Carolinas to have a highly fluctuating temperature pattern in the near term. And the reason for that is shown right here. So first of all, trough number 1 moves through Monday into Tuesday, and that's what gives us our chances for the strong to severe storms, again, in the overnight hours on Monday into Tuesday morning. We then see after that the jet stream, by the time we get toward our weekend, remember this now, is trying to build a trough sitting in this area with a big ridge in the Gulf of Alaska. At the same time, large ridge sitting over Greenland with lower pressure and lower heights to its south. That is leading back over toward maybe the development of a southeastern ridge. And you see that taking shape early next week. Now, it's a little bit different configuration. It's not quite as highly amplified as the ridges we saw during spring and early fall. But we do notice that at this time, we do have this ridge building here, what looks to be a trough sneaking around like that, and our flow pattern doing overall something a bit more like this. And if that ridge establishes itself, the thing I'll be watching will be for this corridor right in through here to have a very active pattern. That includes the Carolinas. This ridge is a bit farther to the south than the previous ones. So that's why week 2 is looking wet like it is right now, okay? So let's now get in to see what this does to our temperature pattern. Over the next 5 days, temperatures across the Carolinas relatively normal, relatively close to average. Even as we get out to 6 to 10 day time period, maybe this is the part of the country where things are near average, maybe even slightly warmer than average. But we do notice that that pattern may have a tendency to break down in the 11 to 15 day time period as our pattern starts to fluctuate quite a bit more. And even though that southeast ridge is here, remember it's a little bit farther south and east than previous ridges had been. So we expect to see our temperature patterns on the whole to remain much more closer to average, while the rest of the country deals with a highly volatile pattern overall. That's our near-term temperature pattern, at least for the next 15 days. To finish this up, I'm going to give you a brief update on South America as much of our market attention turns there. Right now, compared to a year ago, our vegetation health index through much of Brazil's growing region and in parts of Argentina is worse than it was a year ago. And that's because of the long-standing drought conditions there. This is our true 2-month drought monitor update here from August 1st to September 30th. And we can still see that the lingering drought in large sections of Brazil, especially getting into southern Brazil down here. Now, in northern Brazil, in a place called Mato Grosso, which is here, which grows a lot of corn, soybeans, and cotton, we do see that they have brought their precipitation amounts much more closer to average with a lot of rainfall over the last 30 days or so. When you get a little bit farther south down here into Paraná, this is an area where they have had a couple of big rainfall events recently, but overall still carrying a drier bias as we progress into their planting season. So they need the rain to get that soybean crop to germinate. To finish this up, though, I want to show you one last thing, and that is over the next 15 days, we are expecting Rio Grande do Sul, northern Argentina, and Uruguay to be on the wetter side of things, but still drier than average across a big section of Brazil as we progress now into the month of November. So we got a lot to be watching here in both North America and South America. And as we finish up a growing season and they begin one, both locations are experiencing volatile weather. So with that, I'm going to wrap up right here. Wheat Nutrient Ag Solutions and at the Farm Credit Associations in North Carolina, we thank you for your attention. Have a great week. Keep a close eye on everything toward the end of this week because our models are still in disagreement. I'll get you updated on what happened early next week. Have a great week. Thank you.